Hi, this is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And I have the most wonderful guests for you today, CONOR McANALLY, and we're talking all the way to Ireland. And this is so exciting for me because not only is he in Ireland, he is in a place in Ireland that I have been dreaming about since I was 11 years old. Yes, it
Very good.
it was meant to be that I would meet you and that I would get to talk to you, because tell everybody where you are and why. I'll tell everybody then why it's so important to me.
Well, I'm in Portumna in East Galway, in County Galway in Ireland, and love it here. Absolutely love it here. But it's a place you know well.
Oh, I do. I know. I've been dreaming about it since I was 11 because of Jane Eyre. Because as that's where Mr. Rochester planned to send Jane. And
That's right.
And of course, when I have followed in her footsteps and in Charlotte Bronte's footsteps all over England, into Scotland, because she went to Scotland, and of course she went to Ireland. So I've been to every place that she ever went to.
That is so cool.
And I fell in love with Jane Eyre when I was 11. And I have been just a fan of hers. And of course, when we got to Ireland, my husband and I moved to England. So I was living in England. Of course, we went to Ireland often for a very special James Joyce and this thing. But I, of course, wanted to come. I was looking for Bitternut Lodge. And I had always thought it was like town. And then I discovered, of course, it's a county, right? It's one of the counties of Connacht.
Right.
Is that the right pronunciation?
Connacht. Yeah, Connacht is the most western province of Ireland. So we divided Ireland originally into 5 provinces: Ulster in the north, Leinster in the east, Munster in the south, and Connacht in the west. And the 5th one was the county of Meath, which is where all the high kings were. And eventually, over time, Meath disappeared into Leinster. But interestingly, in the Gaelic language, a province is still called a cuige, which means a 5th. Connacht is Connacht, which is a 5th of a 5th Connacht, which is a 5th of the country. Although these days it's only a quarter.
It's a wonderful place. It's all of Ireland. If people want to go, if they want to travel to Europe, I would say go to Ireland. That's where it is so much fun. There's so much to do there. And it's so beautiful. You never forget it. You never forget it. When they talk about green, there are greens in Ireland that I don't think you see anyplace else.
The thing is, we have 40 shades of green in Ireland, and you don't get it unless you have a good lot of rain. So we have plenty of rain, but we have plenty of sunshine to go with it.
That reminds me of Galway, because when we got to Galway, boy, did we have rain.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a wonderful place. Of course, in those days, quite a few years ago, those were the disco days when Galway had wonderful discotheques, pubs. Of course, I think I don't remember the name of it. We went to whatever they called the oldest one in Galway.
Oh, I have to remember what that one's called. The oldest pub in the world, continuously serving pub in the world, is actually in Athlone on the River Shannon, which is like about 35 miles away from where I am, Sean Bar. It's been there since the 1600s.
Oh, I think you have even older ones. I think there's somewhere in Ireland, there's one that's before the year 1000. Irish have been at it for a long time.
Indeed, we have. The pub has always been a cultural centre for Ireland. It's not really so much about drinking, it's more about connection and storytelling.
Well, I lived in a little village in England, and we had 3 pubs, a butcher, and a sweet shop. And that's all we needed in that village.
When I got to where I live in Portumna, I checked it out. And at one time, not these days, but at the moment we have in Portumna, there are 2 supermarkets. There's 1 hardware shop. There's a couple of hairdressers. but at one time there were 14 pubs. It's reduced somewhat over the years since you're not allowed to drink and drive, but there were 14 pubs here at one time.
I have 3 pubs in a little village and nobody had to drive anywhere. So it was perfect.
Perfect.
And of course, we are here today to talk about the first, and I'm telling everybody it's the first in a major series by CONOR McANALLY. And I should point out that he is an award-winning writer, performer, producer, TV director, and Bullets in the Water is a fantastic book. I just love it. And for many reasons, and the minute I knew that it was going to be a series, I didn't need you to tell me, although I hope you confirm it, because it's cinematic, of course, because we'll tell people a little bit about your background, because people will right away notice the dialogue is great in this book. And that's because CONOR was born to dialogue. He has been listening to dialogue since the day. I don't know if you were born in a hospital or at home, but that his life is dialogue because his parents are both famous actors in Ireland and, of course, over in England. They did a lot of acting in England, too. They were talking dialogue to you. I bet you heard Shakespeare before most people.
Indeed, and lots of other stuff. Yeah, we would frequently be once we were able to speak and read a little bit, we were frequently roped in to run lines with one or other of our parents. So that was really interesting. Yeah, dialogue has been a part of my life since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And then, of course, when I went into radio and television, it's all about writing dialogue. When you're writing scripts for radio and TV, that's what you're doing. You're writing dialogue. So dialogue's always been something that I've been tuned into. And I love writing it because I think you can really get the idiosyncrasies of a person in the little phrases that they use that, say, somebody else might not use. And it gives characters a bit of distinction. And it also helps to move plots forward very quickly.
Exactly. Now, the wonderful thing is just a few lines of dialogue can say more than 3 pages of exposition. It's just amazing. Of course, we'd expect that from an Irishman in general. You're full of stories and you're going to tell us a lot of them. My girlfriends who came over from America to visit, and they'd say, oh, we're going to Paris. We're going to meet a French guy. And I'd say, oh, forget it. I said, head yourself over to Dublin and meet an Irishman because there's nothing better than an Irish accent. And it's so simple. And I will say they are so much better. Definitely. So you maintain your accent, which is nice.
It's had a few alterations over the years. I lived in London for 17 years and then moved to Austin, lived in Los Angeles for a while, in New York as well. I still have a bit of a brogue, but I suppose the acting gene has come and visited me as well, because depending on where I am, the accent develops that kind of flavor from time to time, to the point where times when I come home, people can tell who I've been talking to, depending on like there was a guy called Vernon McCarthy, a very good friend of mine, skydiving friend of mine, and he was from County Cork. And if I came home with any kind of a lilt or a sing-song in my voice, my wife would say, have you been talking to Vernon McCarthy lately? Is that who you've been talking to? So there were no secrets.
And so when you're in Austin and wearing a Stetson, can you talk like a cowboy?
Oh, I try. I do try.
You do.
Yeah, but that's the thing, PatZi, from the time I was very small. In fact, the very first photograph of me, other than as an ugly baby, is me at, I think, the age of 4 on a tricycle wearing a cowboy hat with a little toy Winchester rifle and a little toy 6-gun and a pair of little cowboy boots on my tricycle, ready to go after the bad guys. I've always wanted to get to Texas.
You've made it, and it's so nice. I'm in Austin, and you're now part-time in Austin. So
yes,
now we're going to get together. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Next time, I should be over soon. I'm just getting over a broken leg, but I'll be over in the next month or 2.
Oh, okay, you haven't missed anything here because it's been really cold and you didn't want to be here the past few weeks. Down to 17 here, which was rather surprising. But before we talk about bullets in the water, I just want to tell people a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Conor is something really special. His TV shows have garnered 22 major awards, including 5 British Academies and 5 from the Royal Television Society. And then Love Spines was the 2024 winner of Plaza Prize Microfiction. So that's pretty good.
That was fun. That was fun to get. I must say, that was a lot of fun. And that was the microfiction prize was you had to have a story in under 300 words. Love Spines came in at 298 words. And that involved weeks of chopping and editing and rewrites, but it was nice to get it. It's a fun little story with a turn and a twist at the end.
Let's get into this book because
Sure.
it's quite amazing. I had not heard about the story behind it because it was inspired by a real story that happened here in Texas and about an ongoing problem in Texas and definitely all over the Southwest. So tell us
Sure.
about this.
Okay, the book originally was inspired by 2 murders. I used to live in Bastrop, Texas, and about a mile and a half from the house I was living in on Main Street in Bastrop, Texas, a newspaper carrier was delivering the Austin Statesman and the local Bastrop Advertiser at about 3:15, 4 o'clock in the morning in 2013, and she was shot dead. Initially, the police thought she'd had a heart attack and run her car off the road into the trees. But it turned out she'd been shot. She had a single gunshot to the head, and the murder's never been solved. And that kind of intrigued me that such an innocent thing as delivering newspapers to people's houses could put you in danger. And it involved her happening across, it is believed, some drug trafficking that was going on, and she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so that was something that kind of embedded itself in the back of my brain. I thought, that's something kind of very unusual. I'd like to use that in the story sometime. And there was another murder a year prior to that where a lady who worked with police was gunned down by 2 guys who were contract killers who had been contracted by her boyfriend to assassinate her. And it happened in it was not an abandoned vault, but it was the forecourt of a shopping mall outside of Bastrop that had never opened for business. And nobody quite understand why it had been built for about 10 years and never opened for business, always manicured and lovely and ready for people to move in, but never actually occupied. And she was murdered in the car park of this place as a result of being pregnant when her boyfriend didn't want her pregnant because he was married. That case was solved. It was a policeman who had done it, who fled the country, but was eventually extradited and came back, and he and both the contract killers ended up in jail. But those were sort of 2 murders that had happened within several miles of where I was living. And the other thing that kind of inspired the book is I've always been fascinated by small towns. And when I arrived in Bastrop, I absolutely loved the place. It was built in 1832, founded in 1832. And when I drove into the main street, it was like, oh, wow, this is a Western town. It still had buildings from the 1860s and whatnot. And the whole sort of sense of small town and the power bases within small towns and the generational influences that families have in small towns has always fascinated me. In Ireland, we've had the similar things in towns and villages here. The power base over the years, it used to be the teacher, the priest, the local police sergeant, the bank manager, if there was a bank, and they controlled what went on in the town. It's slightly different in Texas, but that sense of it has always fascinated me. And the other thing that I was looking at the time was the amount of drugs that were flooding into the US from Mexico across the border, and how small towns, particularly those down near the southern border, were getting taken over and very heavily influenced by cartels. So all of those things together were part of the story. And the other part of the story is that the scarcity of water is going to get more and more scarce as time goes on. And people say that water is going to be the new oil. So all of those elements arrive in to the book. And it's called Bullets in the Water because it is the extent to which people will go to maintain power, number one, and their ambition to make money out of the new oil. So that's where the title comes from, Bullets in the Water.
First of all, you have just captured Texas. And that comes, I think, partly from being an actor and a producer. You notice detail. And you have done that so beautifully here with even little things, all the little things, like the lawyer. When you were so funny, I won't tell the beginning of the story, but in the beginning of the story, your main character needs a lawyer, and you bring in a lawyer. And one little thing, Arthur, the nice thing about being a real human being, a real writer who notices things, is when you wrote that he walked through a door, but he ducked his head because he had, of course, his Stetson on. And this is exactly what happens to guys who wear Stetson. They don't take their hat off.
Right.
They don't want to take it off. I knew a cowboy in Europe who wore Stetson everywhere, and even on the ski slopes. Didn't take it.
Right.
And those were the days before they made you wear a helmet. Oh, I can't imagine what would have happened if somebody coming down a ski slope in Europe and they're wearing their Stetson. That's something spectacular.
That'd be it. I'd love to see that photograph.
And the way you write, so immediately we know we're in Texas, real Texas, and that he's a real Texan. That's what they do. And all these little things. And then we have the house of the main character. Again, we're going to talk about him because he is so good. Very Irish in nature. There's a lot of sort of the trope of an Irishman who's had a few problems in his life.
Yep. Yeah, he has a few problems with the old drink. His name is Mike Carson, and all of the characters in the book are named after people who were in the original colonizers in Stephen F. Austin's original colony. So what I did in order to name the characters, I went back to all of the names of the original colony people, and I've mixed up their first names and their last names. But Carson was one of the names that came out of that. And Carson would have been an Irish name. It would have come out of the Scots-Irish, Northern Ireland area. So that kind of gave me an opportunity to play around with that character as well. But that's way back in his history, in Mike Carson's history. Somebody would have moved from Ireland or from Scotland over to the US and gradually made their way to Texas.
Exactly. And what makes it intriguing, of course, is that you give him a backstory, but you don't tell everything because a lot of the backstory is going to come up in book 2 and book 3 and book 4 because he has quite a background. So tell us the basic background. And I love that he was a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and a little drink and a little something else brought him to Texas.
Yeah, the thing about Mike is Mike has tasted success early. And very often when that happens, people who've had that success early on in their life find it difficult to replicate. And that puts a lot of pressure on them. It's like when a band has a #1 album, screamingly wonderful #1 album was their first out. And then there's all the worries about the second album and how you're going to get on with all of that. And Mike has a bit of that going on. He gets very early success. He wins a Pulitzer Prize very early on, but he starts running out of steam and the pressure mounts on him. And he gradually starts to do two things. One, he starts trying to find a bit of solace in the bottom of a whiskey glass, but you don't see the world clearly through the bottom of a whiskey glass. And the other thing that he does is he starts to cut corners, which is obviously something journalists and should never do. And all of that results in him losing both his job in New York at a very prestigious New York paper and losing his marriage because he's used information that his wife gave him confidence and he hasn't properly checked it out. And there are fairly dire consequences as a result of the story that he writes. So he arrives back in Texas to sell his late uncle's house. It was also a local journalist. And in the process of doing that, he is asked by a lady that he had gone to the prom with to investigate the murder of her husband, who was delivering newspapers early in the morning. That's where that story comes in. And she's getting the runaround from the police. They're not answering her questions. There's something up. She doesn't know what. And she realizes he's an investigative journalist. He should be able to dig down and get the truth. So but he's a character that's struggling with his fall from grace, if you like, his lack of control over his drinking. He's now in the minor leagues. He's lost the big leagues. Will he ever get back to the big leagues again? That is a question that's plaguing him. Where does he go from here?
And of course, one of the things that was essential to the story is really to make us believe in the little town that he returns to. And there are so many things that, of course, coming from a little town myself, I was really amused at all of there's so much truth in so much of this. So tell us about how you developed the town. So you lived in Bastrop yourself.
Yes. This is a fictional town called Taborville in a fictional county called Tabor County, Texas. Not unlike Bastrop in lots of ways. But obviously, a lot of the things that I saw during my time there and observed, I decided quite early on in the book, I really wanted the town to be a character, because this is where Mike's early character was formed. And I wanted the town to be present and be a force within the book. So it was important to make sure that all the buildings felt right, that the architecture felt right, but also that the political dynamics felt right, the personal relationships felt right, the sort of interactions between townspeople felt right. It was very much on my mind to make sure that the town itself was a real, believable, livable town. It's not Bastrop, but it's fairly similar to Bastrop.
You've drawn a town that is familiar to people, small towns that have lost businesses, small towns that have been struggling over the years and are ready to do something, anything, to keep going, to make money. And you've created that. And I love how you describe the uncle's house. The minute you explained it, so visual. I was already shooting the series, okay? I was ready for Amazon Prime or Netflix to start. We're gonna build this. And when we build this, you have to invite me up there to watch the filming, because you'll find a place that will suit the uncle's house. I love it. I love it.
So the uncle's house is, and these things actually happened. The uncle's house replaced the original building that was on the site, which was basically a dog trough, which would have been 2 log cabins with a central piece in the middle, built along a breezeway. But you could buy and have shipped in on a catalogue a 3 or 4 bedroom house from Sears catalogue back in the day out onto the frontier. And so the uncle's house is that. You could buy one of those at the time for $872. And so this is a house that was erected on the same site for $872, complete with a wraparound porch. But it's fallen into disrepair. It has been neglected over the years. The uncle has had ill health for quite a while. And so it's always needed a lot of repair. And it hasn't had it. So when Mike arrives back to sell it, he realizes, gosh, I've got to do some work on this place. I can't sell it the way it is. So that's one of the other challenges that he has to face when he gets back home.
Little side story, which is so good because I know the minute we got to that part, I was thinking, oh no, don't sell it, fix it up. There's lots of work to do. I was already planning how, because if they find a house like that and they redo it, they're beautiful.
Sure.
It's amazing the quality that Sears put into that $872 house.
Absolutely. They're amazing. Absolutely extraordinary. One of the houses that we lived in, Bastrop, the original house we were there, it was a really large place. And again, I think a lot of it probably came in from the horse-drawn carriages and all puff trains. It was a big 2-story place, but a lot of that came directly from the East Coast and came across. But what it did was it was sitting on enormous cedar beams. They were like about 3 foot in a square underneath the house, and they were still there to this day. And if you went up into the attic, you had these rough-hewn cedar in there as well. Extraordinarily well-built houses. We're not used to wooden houses in Ireland, so the whole idea of an entire wood house was foreign to me when I got to Texas. But my goodness, they made them strong and very good. But they wiggle and move during the year. Sometimes your door goes this way, sometimes your door goes that way, depending on the weather and the wind and the rain and the cold or the warm. But they're living, breathing things.
Of course, you being in cinema and me being cinematic too, because I did work in Hollywood for a little while. We visualize it. We visualize it. We see it.
Sure.
The minute, that's what, it's always so exciting. It's exciting to be in at the beginning of over the years, I've been, it's now 11 years, and I've started with the first book in somebody's series. And I was the one that was first talking to them about the book. I always know if it's cinematic. Within 5 pages, I'm sure you're working on the second one.
Yeah, I'm well into the second one at the moment. There's a third one as well. Whether we get to 4, I'm not entirely sure, but certainly there'll be 3.
There'll be 4. What's wonderful is, of course, being cinematic, thinking in advance, thinking of your character. You've got 3 strong men. Mike is a great character, but you've got 2 of his friends almost steal the show because they're really great. You need action, and you have action with these guys, and these guys have enough action in this book. But because they're also of an age, a nice sort of 40-ish age, they're interesting. I'm casting them already. They got
they've all lived a little, haven't they? Sam Washington, his friend from the police force, I love his character. He's so fun. And then he's got his pal Frank Wolf in Philadelphia Inquirer. And they're fun people to be around and be with. I've written a couple of short stories about Sam Washington since as well, on top of all the other stuff that I've been doing. But yeah, I like Sam a lot.
Tell us a little bit about his backstory.
Sam comes from a family of police officers, basically, but he's also been a footballer. And so he was one of the first people in his family to go to college. He ends up going to college, but getting injured in a college game and ends up not being able to go to the NFL. So basically comes back to the family business, and he then goes through local police forces, but eventually gets to be an investigator for the Attorney General of Texas, which allows him a much wider scope of things to look into. And I have a friend who inspired Sam Washington, who's actually the police chief in Hutto, and he's a very inspiring person. And Sam, to a degree, is certainly inspired by him, not necessarily fully based on him, but certainly inspired by him.
The story does center so much on water that is as valuable, if not more valuable, than gold. And
Absolutely.
since I got here, I learned so much about the problems with all the population moving here. And I think half of California moving here.
Right.
They need water. They want water.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's becoming a scarcer and scarcer commodity. And as time goes on, I think that's only going to be a situation that will get worse, because as we move into AI and the whole AI world, the demand for electricity and also demand for cooling is a huge issue for big data banks and the big power that is needed for AI. So water is a crucially important thing. And as places develop, they're going to have water issues. So water will become more and more valuable. We've seen in Mexico City that they were due to run out of water at one point in 7 days. So it's a vitally important thing. Obviously, we can live without gasoline, but we can't live without water. So it's a critical thing to get right. And in Texas, there are all sorts of issues going on about water, and that's something I was aware of from early doors. My wife was on the city council in Bastrop for 8 years, and so I learned a lot about water and the need for it and how local authorities are trying to deal with it during that period of time when she was on the council.
When you want antagonists, you got them. There's so many people there who just want to make money, and they don't
Absolutely.
do it. So you have a lot of things to deal with here.
Absolutely. The thing about investigative journalism that I found as an investigative journalist back in the day when I was doing it for a living is that you start off asking fairly simple questions, but eventually you hit a point where those questions are bothering somebody and you start to get pushback. And the more you get pushback, the more you know you're on the right track. And therefore you keep asking questions down that track and you get more and more pushback as a result. And that's what happened with Mike when he's trying to get to the bottom of this single murder. That's where he starts. It's not where he and the book finish, but that's where it all starts. And I remember, like, at one point we were doing a story, myself and a colleague were doing a story about bombings in Dublin that had been engineered to swing a vote in the Irish Parliament to introduce fairly draconian laws against armed fighters like the Irish Republican Army. And we were investigating whether there was British intelligence operatives involved in that. And as we got to a certain point in it, and we were starting to get somewhere, we were starting to identify some shadowy figures involved, my colleague was on late duty in the newspaper. And when you're on that late duty, you also have to man the telephones and take death notices. So on this particular night while he was there, he answers the phone and somebody said to him, the death notice, and sits down at the typewriter to do it. And it's CONOR McANALLY following an accident. And that was like designed to scare the both of us, as you can imagine. And frankly, it did.
Well, yeah, I think that would be a good one. We have to save that for a scene in the book somewhere. The next book. Yeah.
Those sorts of things would happen in real life as you were an investigative reporter, because when people are trying to hide stuff, the closer you get to the truth, the more pushback you get. And depending on how important the secret is, the levels to which people will go vary fairly considerably. And sometimes people will go to the extent of physical harm. We've seen that happen here and all over the world, especially these days. It's open season on journalists a lot of the time these days. It's certainly a much more dangerous profession now than it was when I was practicing it.
And you've had quite a career.
Yeah, I've had sort of several careers, really. I started when I was leaving school. My dad said to me, and my dad was brilliant. He was always incredibly supportive almost too supportive sometimes. He can cumber you with help on occasions. But my dad said to me, he said, "Oh, what do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to write." And I said, "Books and stuff." And he said, "You'll never make a living doing that, son." He said, "You've got two choices. You can go into journalism or advertising." I didn't want to be writing for Kellogg's Cornflakes or the banks or whatever. So I decided journalism was the course for me. Went to journalism school, got into the newspaper business, and thoroughly enjoyed that for 5 or 6 years. But then the newspaper got taken over by an entrepreneur who decided he wanted to turn it into a tabloid. And at that point, I was like, this is not for me anymore. I don't want to spend my time fighting about the veracity of the story and not sensationalizing. So I went out of there to the Irish National TV Service and Radio Service, became a journalist there for a few years, and transitioned out of that into program presenting. I presented political programs and also children's programs, which was a bit ridiculous because one minute I was talking about the latest government ministers who were getting appointed, and the next I was on a soapbox derby on the same day on a different show. And that didn't go down all that well. So eventually I quit the journalism part and went into entertainment, and then went into producing and directing, and was very fortunate. I set up some various production companies over the years, but I was very fortunate to have kind of some early hits in Ireland, and then eventually went to the UK, ended up doing a lot of work in Britain, and that work in Britain got recognized in the US. And the company that I was working with and the show that I was working on were bought by DirecTV and by a record company in the States. And so I ended up in Hollywood and ended up producing and directing in Hollywood for a number of years. And then eventually I got to a point where we had a house in Bastrop, I think for 4 years. And I hadn't spent more than 14 consecutive nights in it. And at a certain point, I decided, look, this is a bit silly. I quit Hollywood and eventually moved back to Texas full time and freelanced out of there, but continued to work all over the country, but got to spend a bit more time at home and in my town, which was lovely. I thoroughly enjoyed that. But I worked a lot of music shows. I've worked with, I think it's 2,527 artists over the years. I've been very blessed and very fortunate to have had a very exciting and interesting series of adventures that some people would call it work. Me, most of it was fun.
It's funny that your father didn't suggest that you start writing scripts for him.
Right. Yeah, he probably should.
Should've.
He did. I did go on the stage once in a play he directed when I was 12. And apparently I mustn't have been very good, because afterwards he came up to me and he said, "You're not very good at being other people. I think you should think of a different profession," which was fine. So I've been very happy to be me ever since.
But I think some of your other family members, your sister did some acting, and she had
She
been
did.
on Joy on Paper many times.
That's right. Neve, yeah, she's been on several times. Yeah, Neve was an actress at one point and a stage manager. We've all done lots of different things. My brother Angus was a musician and also was a TV presenter and an actor and a radio and television presenter. And he became a radio producer. He's still gigging with his guitar, and he's a comedian, and he also is a close-up magic guy, so he's multi-talented lad. And our other sister, Moira, although she didn't go down the sort of being on stage route, plays, I think, 7 instruments, and probably is the smartest of all of us, bless her. But she's not a lady who likes the limelight, unlike the rest of us.
Irish are great at dialogue. General. That's why I always found Irishmen so sexy, because they talk so nicely. It's not just the accent, it's also the charm.
A lot of that comes from the Gaelic language, I think. We don't speak English, we speak Hiberno English. And it's English that has been influenced by the structure of the Gaelic language, which is not the same at all. So, like a simple thing, in English, you would say, I am sad. So that the sadness is in you. In Gaelic, we would say there is sadness upon me, as if it were a sort of an outside force. You would say there is happiness upon me, there is sadness upon me. And the structure of the Gaelic language, when you start to translate that into English, it becomes a different way of putting the same thing. And we have some tenses in Gaelic that you don't have in English. So like we have an immediate past tense. We would, if we just finished doing something, we'd say, I'm just after making the dinner. You wouldn't say, I made the dinner, because I made the dinner could have been 5 minutes ago or last week. It's 5 minutes ago. We'd say, I'm just after finishing the dinner. So it gives you a sort of, I guess, what we call in Ireland a blas, a flavor that's different to regular English. I remember going into a restaurant one time fairly soon after I got to the US, and the waitress just said, can you please talk slightly? Oh, about what? Anything you like. I just love your accent.
Anything. I could listen to an Irishman all day long. And that's exactly what I said. I send it to you the minute I heard you were coming to me. Just talk. When you talk thing. Talk about golf. I don't like golf that much, but if
it's with an Irish accent.
I'll
God
listen
bless it.
to anything.
You poor woman. You poor woman.
It's so delightful. It's so delightful. I mentioned your father,
Uh-huh.
Ray. Tell us a little bit about him, because he passed away too young.
Yep. Died at the age of
Of course.
He died at the age of 63, which was very young. He had really started to make an impact on the international scene in movies. He'd worked with Robert De Niro a few times. He did a movie called The Mission with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons and Liam Neeson, a very young Liam Neeson at the time, about Jesuits in South America. And he had really started to crack the international movie scene when he died. And which was a terrible shock to us, as you can imagine. He seemed to be so strong and so robust as a man. He had a huge influence on me growing up. And he's the person, I think, the most important stuff I learned from my dad in terms of finding the truth and sticking to the truth and respecting the truth. He could peel an onion metaphorically faster than anybody I knew. He could get to the kernel of an issue really quickly. And he always was able to push aside the dross and get the heart, whatever it was. I remember the first time I went freelance and out of an organization, I rang him up and I said, Dad, I'm about to go freelance. What do I need to know? You've been freelance most of your life. And he thought for a minute and he said, there's two things about going freelance. So I said, the first is take the next job. I was like, he said, the second is if you're offered two jobs, get the better one. And I went, and he said, that's all. And on one level, I was terribly disappointed. I was expecting some sort of really profound thing. But on the other hand, he was absolutely right. You take the next job that's offered. And if there's two jobs, you pick the better of the two jobs. And I remember one time, years later, there were two jobs being offered. And one of them was definite and the other was a maybe. And it was more attractive in theory. But I was getting to a point where I'd had to make a decision. So I said to myself, what would my dad say at this point? And he'd say, is the other job a real job? Do you have two offers? And the truth was, no, you don't. So I took the one that wasn't the job. And the other one actually never transpired, never got off the ground in the end anyway. But he was that sort of simple and profound, though, and had thought all of these things through. he was an interesting character. Not easy to get on with as a kid. Much better when you were older. I don't think he understood how to deal with very small children. But like once you reach the age of the use of reason, he was great. But prior to that, he just wasn't sure like what you were.
He gave you some good advice, and as we see with the British Academy Awards behind you, you chose a lot of good things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There were so many other things I learned from him as well. Like one of the things he did teach all of us, and like my sister Neve has it in abundance, as does, you know, my other siblings. And he taught us the value of hard work. And he would say, there's talent to burn in Ireland, and that's all you can do with most of it. Because unless you put the work in, the talent doesn't matter. And he was very much a guy who would say it's 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And like, I remember talking to him about writing at one point. He said, do you know what the most important thing about writing is, son? I said, what's that? He said, the application of your bottom to the chair. And it's true. You can talk about writing, but if you're not sitting down, the pen in your hand or a typewriter or a little laptop computer, you're not doing it.
I do love the British Academy Award. I think it's so pretty compared to the American one. I like that one.
Yeah, it's wondrously heavy as well. It's shocking. I like when you get it first, you go, oof. It's solid brass.
Well,
it's a nice piece.
5 of them is nice, and you never know when.
Yeah, it's lovely that they're all spoken for at the moment.
Yeah, we get bullets in the water into a series, so you're going to have more awards to put on your shelf. That's for sure.
Please God.
Oh, no, I
Please
know.
God.
Yes, I'm not kissing the Blarney Stone. I'm telling you the truth. I'm going to be able to. You have to invite me to one of the shoots because I love being on set. Oh, I wasn't in Hollywood very long, and it's a long, sad story. But I'll tell it to you one day. What's your very favorite drink? Very favorite.
My favorite drink?
Yeah.
Oh, I have 2. One would be a pint of Guinness in Ireland, because Guinness tastes different here than anywhere else in the world, and it has to do with the water. And the other is I do love a really nice, robust glass of red wine. Those are my 2 tipples.
What I love that you have this in the 3rd sentence of your book. You turn bourbon into a verb. Love that. Bourbon. You're the first one to turn bourbon into a verb.
I tell you what, and now I'm not normally a spirits drinker, but the bourbon that I used for mine is called Bullet, Bullet. And some friends of mine, when my book came out, sent me a bottle of Bullet bourbon with a glass that had a bullet going through the side of the glass. And I got to tell you, that stuff tastes very nice. Goes down very smoothly.
When I lived in Europe, just to drive people crazy, I would order bourbon. Now, not every place would have bourbon in those days. And I would do something people who love bourbon would think is sacrilegious. I would ask it on ice. Bourbon on ice. Now, you go to Paris and ask them for bourbon on ice, and they never forget you.
Right.
It's a way to be memorable. When you go to Paris and you order Calvados, they don't remember you. But if you ordered bourbon on ice, every time you come in, they'll say, "Oh, how are you? How are you?" And they're giving you bourbon on ice. They've gotten a bottle since I was there.
So next time I'm in Paris, I'll go in and ask for bourbon on ice, and they'll go, "Are you a friend of PatZi's?"
That's right. You might find somebody who says, "What?" They had Irish whiskey, they had Scotch whiskey, but they didn't have bourbon. So just to show them that Americans had something that was good.
Very good. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't that story of whiskey and how it moved and translated, came originally from here, from Scotland and Ireland and made its way to the US. And all the flavors come from whatever happened to be growing around at the time. And that's poachine, which was the Irish drink that was made from potatoes illegally in the years gone by. Made whiskey out of whatever you could. You made spirits out of whatever you could get your hands on. I think I've never, ever in my life been as drunk as I was one time when I drank poachine with a policeman who had confiscated it, and we shared a bottle of poachine, and I don't think either of us recovered for 3 days.
That's why your writing is so good. You have these little details. You have these little unexpected things, like the cowboy bending his head. So
Right.
He doesn't take that from bourboning. Coming out with a lovely verb. Might go in the Oxford Dictionary now. Bourboning.
Yeah, he was bourboning his way through a Rolodex of regrets, I think is the line.
That's a beautiful sentence. I love it. I love it. It's just perfect. And there are so many wonderful sentences throughout the book. You just capture, of course, the dialogue. And then what is it called? To people, what it's called in Ireland, this banter. Dialogue that bounces. It moves.
I was finding a nice, polite way to say it. I was going to say something slightly ruder than that, but we do talk an awful lot of nonsense in Ireland. But it's the crack, as we call it. It's the fun. It's the light-hearted nature of Irish banter. It's we extract the Michael from each other. We make fun of each other in lots of different ways, and the whole Irish sense of humor is based a lot on kind of semi-insults, and that, but they're good natured. They're good natured. So that, we talk a lot, but sometimes we're not. Sometimes there's not an awful lot of content in the chat.
Who cares? It sounds so good.
And you have fun doing it. You have fun doing it. That's the thing.
Talk about a carburetor in Irish and make it sound interesting.
And my wife, when we lived in England, we had some very talkative next door neighbors. And every time any of them saw us in the back garden, they'd want to speak. And like my wife, who was from Austin, would make a beeline for the house, ducking under the hedge as she went. And I'd be like, what? You was up out there for 45 minutes on my own. She went, but you're really good at that, aren't you? You can talk about nothing forever.
And make it fun. So you're smiling and you don't know what they're talking about half the time, but it's just wonderful to hear the sound. That lyrical, sing-songy. It's just perfect. Puts a smile on your face. We were driving. Here was a Galway. We were in someplace, and we had rented a car because we didn't bring our car from England. We had a Cadillac.
Oh, wow.
We flew in and we rented a car and we're driving around Ireland and we had some mechanical problem. We stopped and my husband is talking to the mechanic. And this is one of those countryside places. I don't think he understood 3 words, but the young guy was so delightful and so cute.
Yeah, I probably had no clue what the guy was saying at all. Yeah, there's all sorts of stories told about, especially about Americans in Ireland. And one of the ones is a guy, he's driving down the road and he gets into this small village and he's lost and he stops and he says, could you tell me how to get to Dublin? And the guy goes, you're going to Dublin? And he goes, yeah, I'm going to Dublin. Dublin, is it? Yes, Dublin, yeah. Oh, now I tell you what, he said, if I was going to Dublin, I wouldn't be starting from here. It's just like, what? I had a friend recently who came over and he was in Dublin and he'd got separated. It was a guy from television. There was a bunch of them over in Dublin and they got separated in a nightclub for some reason. And he ended up staying on in a nightclub longer than the rest of them. The rest of them had gone back to the hotel. And he came out of this nightclub about 3:30 in the morning and he realized he needed to get a cab to get home. But he only had €5. That was all he had left because of the high price drink in the nightclub. So he went, there was a line of taxis at a taxi rank. He went down to them And he was saying, I need to go to such and such a hotel. And they were like, how much will that cost? They're like 15. So I only have 5. Oh, too bad. But he was going, he went down the whole line of taxis and he was getting over. And there was a guy leaning up against a building who eventually peeled himself off the wall and walked over to him and said, you're looking for a taxi? Yeah. He goes, yeah. And so you have a fiver? He went, yeah. So I'll take you. And he goes, oh, brilliant. That's great. So the guy takes off down the road and my friend follows him down and they go around the corner and he's thinking, this must be an unofficial taxi. This is probably some guy who doesn't have a license or anything. So they go down this road and there's no car in sight and they cross another block and eventually he says to the guy, he says, excuse me, he said, where's the car? He said, I don't have a card. He said, this is a walking taxi. He said, a walking taxi, how does that work? He said, you want to get home to your hotel, don't you? And he goes, yeah. He said, I know the way and you don't. That'll cost you a $5. And that was it.
That's why I love you, Irish. Absolutely. We'll always tell a wonderful story. Just that's why you're full of stories. Here's the book, and I want everybody to get this book. But while I've got you, tell us a few of the famous people that you worked with over the years. And one, there's one actor who I'm crazy about. I don't know at what period you were working in London, but do you know Sean Evans, who plays Endeavour?
Yes, I do. I've never met him, though. I've never met him, unfortunately.
Yes.
No, when I was in London, I was working mostly with musicians. I was doing a series of weekly shows, weekly live music shows was what I was primarily working on. And I worked with, Madonna, U2, Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, Red Hot Chili Peppers, some members of the Grateful Dead, Greg Allman, Billie Eilish, like a huge range of people over the years, huge range of people. And the show I was running had 6 live acts every week performing live in the studio. If anybody was promoting a record at that time, we had them on our show. And it was a very successful Saturday morning show, one of the most successful Saturday morning shows. It was a youth-based program, but had a double audience. It had a young audience and an older audience. And that was the show that I took to the US then as well. It was in the UK, it was called CD UK, which was Countdown UK, and it became Countdown USA. And when we did it at DirecTV. But I've worked with lots and lots of legacy artists over the years. Everybody from Mavis Staples to, oh God, there's so many. Just every rock star that you can imagine I've worked with at some point, and rap stars as well, pop bands, lots and lots and lots of different people over the years. Bob Geldof, Boomtown Raps, all of those kinds of people.
So was Madonna, was that when she was young? And
yeah, that was early on doors. She was huge at the time and quite a bit aloof and a bit distant. Was an incredible artist and incredibly professional to work with. Interesting, there's one great story. On one of the weeks we had on the same show, we had R. Kelly, who has got himself into all kinds of trouble with the authorities in the US as a result of his non-musical exploits, shall we say. But we had him on the show and we had Paul McCartney on the same show. And R. Kelly showed up on a tour bus with 40 people, although he was performing solo. Like he had chefs and hairdressers and makeup artists and security and dancers that weren't dancing and all kinds of stuff. And on the very same show, Paul McCartney of the Beatles shows up in the passenger seat of a VW bug driven by his publicist. No security, no hairdressers, nothing. Just Paul McCartney and his publicist. And I always thought that was an extraordinary example of how the really successful people are humble, and the wannabes are not quite so much.
Oh, that's nice. I'm glad because he was my, so yeah.
I lovely guy. I was shaking his hand for the first time, and I went, "Sir Paul, you're very welcome." I went, "Oh, Paul." And my daughter nearly fell over backwards. She's his favorite Beatle as well, or her favorite Beatle rather. So she ended up managing to get her photograph taken and an autograph. And so it was a moment that she absolutely treasured. And that was one of the brilliant things about doing the job that I did. A lot of our friends were able to meet their idols. And like my wife eventually said, I'm not going to go to any concerts because I've seen all these people from a distance of 12 feet in the studio. I don't need to be sitting in the back row in the stadium looking at them through binoculars. We've been very privileged and fortunate to.
Your wife,
She was born and raised in Austin.
you
Well,
meet her.
I met her through a documentary. I had a business partner in Ireland who was the first prominent Irish person to die of AIDS back in the 80s, at a time when nobody really was sure what it was all about. And it was pretty devastating because we had a 50-50 share in the company that I was running, and we were running a very successful TV show at the time that he was hosting in New York and I was producing in New York and Dublin and London. And anyway, I was like, I got to know what happened here. It happened that I was watching one of Ireland's oldest talk show, The Late Show, back in the day, and there was a Catholic priest came on who was ministering to people with AIDS in New York, and something about him really resonated with me. So I decided to make a documentary about him and his work. And during the course of which he talked about sort of two examples of the good and bad of people's reaction to AIDS. One was a guy called Jimmy, whose parents disowned him, once didn't want to know about him, and when he died, refused to accept his body, refused to accept his ashes. And this priest had taken the ashes back and buried them in his own mother's grave in County Clare. And the other was a guy called Stuart, and Stuart's family loved and embraced him and were with him right up to the point of his death at the age of 23. So anyway, I ended up going to New York. I'm shooting this documentary in New York. We're a few days into the shoot, and the priest says, I'm going away for 3 days. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're under contract. And I'm a priest. I have a vow of powerful to sue me. I'm going. And I'm like, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Texas. I said, what are you doing in Texas? He said, I'm saying the first anniversary mass for Stuart. I said, guy you were talking about when you were on TV. He said, yeah, the very same. So we ended up going to Texas with him, with the permission of the family. The mother of the family, Stuart's mom, said we could come and we could film the memorial service. It was 1 year, it was an anniversary 1 year mass. And we said we would. And we got to the mother's house and we were there. And then Stuart's sister arrived and was none too pleased to see a TV crew, and came marching over to me and said, who's in charge here, Beth? And I said, that'll be me. And I think you're disgusting. I think it's appalling that you're trying to make money off of our family's grief. How dare you? I better not see you tomorrow. I better not be aware of your presence in any way, shape, or form. I was like, okay, lady. And I ended up marrying her. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. You found one strong lady.
Yeah. So basically the universe had put us in each other's way, and we kept running into each other over the next sort of couple of years. And I honestly believe that it was Stuart's gift to both of us to put us together. We've been together for 37 years.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. I love that.
Yeah, it wasn't the best of starts,
No,
but it was a
wasn't.
good finish.
I'm so glad you shared that story. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
You're fascinating.
Thank you.
Whenever you want to come on, you can just come on and talk to me. Oh,
Okay. Well,
as a matter of fact, we should talk a little bit more about your short story writing, because I'm very interested in short story writing as a way to hone your craft. And of course, journalism teaches you that, but also short story writing teaches you.
Sure.
When you can write
Sure.
a short story in 300 words, 400 words, and it makes sense and it touches people so much that you win an award for it, that is something special. That's a special talent. And so maybe you'd come back. We can just talk short stories one day.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. That'd be great fun to do. I very much appreciate that opportunity. I do love short stories as well as novels. I mean, there's a lot you can do in a novel that you can't do in a short story. But the short story, I think, that is a lot of fun. But we'll talk about this when we're
We'll talk
talking
about
about
it. As a
short
matter of fact,
story.
when you come back, we're going to
Yeah,
have lunch together
Look,
at the Commodore Perry. Okay.
very good. We'll do that.
That's my favorite place. I spent Thanksgiving there.
Oh,
And,
cool.
oh, fantastic, fantastic food. And I highly recommend anyone coming to Austin. It's a hidden gem in the middle of the city.
Uh-huh.
It is.
Sure is.
Meanwhile, you have a nice website. And
Yep.
it's Conor Mac.
ConorMac.com. Yeah. And if they want to get in touch with me, they get in touch with me through there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. If anybody has questions about the book or whatever, they're welcome to write to my email as well, Conor@ConorMac.com.
Okay.
They're-
And
I love interacting.
When we have lunch, are you going to wear your cowboy hat there?
Indeed, I will. I wear the cowboy hat here as well in Ireland when I'm in the summertime. Funny enough, like you were talking about people wearing cowboy hats skiing. I wear my cowboy hat in the summer in Ireland when I'm playing golf. And my skin person said to me, you need to be wearing a wide brim hat. They were talking about getting those really ugly looking ones that you get to protect yourself from the sun, or the big, huge, wide brim ones or whatever.
Sombrero.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, you know what? I have several that I can use and it'll be grand. So that's it. I have a little one-person golf buggy that looks a bit like a Harley Davidson trike, and I have my cowboy hat. That's cuts a groove here in Portumna. It's not the sort of thing people often see is somebody wandering around here with Stetson on them.
Well,
But yes, they initially would say to me, "Where's your horse, son?" But now they're used to me.
Oh, it's just so much fun to talk to you. And again, everyone get bullets in the water and you will enjoy it and you'll be ready for the next one when it comes along. And meanwhile, again, thank you for joining me today on Joy on Paper Live.
Great pleasure. Thank you so much, PatZi. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye, love. Bye.
From award-winning author Conor McANALLY comes a fast-paced, gritty thriller set in a small Texas town. Returning to his hometown, Mike Carson, an investigative journalist, stumbles upon massive corruption. He had hoped for a quiet life. Instead, he soon finds himself dodging bullets. In the heart of Texas, the game has changed. Water is now the most valuable resource. It sparked a lethal gold rush. It's a war. A real page-turner. Get bullets in the water today. Subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so we can bring you more great authors like Conor McANALLY. Thanks.